In the narrow lanes of our town there stood an old rusty house, and right across from mine lived a truck driver, a man no one paid attention to except when they mocked him, a man who carried the weight of people's furniture, their shifting loads, their discarded memories, and yet was repaid with insults, as everyone whispered that he was a thief who stole things from the trucks at night. Even though I never saw him take anything, I only saw his tired eyes and calloused hands, the way he would sit on the step of his truck smoking silently as if the world had abandoned him. But slowly something strange began happening. Families who had shifted with his truck service vanished a few weeks later. Their houses emptied not because they left willingly but because no one ever heard from them again. And when I tried to connect the dots, the pieces of psychology fell into place like a puzzle. People are quick to label, to project fear and evil on those they already despise. And in that cycle of rejection, monsters are either created or revealed, so pause for a second, ask yourself, what kind of person are you when you judge someone? And if the story grips you even a little, doesn't that mean you're searching for truths in places no one else dares? And maybe that's the exact reason you should subscribe, not for me, but to remind yourself you belong to the minority who seek answers in the shadows rather than staying blind in the light. But back to the truck driver, whose name, I later learned from an old document, was Azim, though everyone called him Chore Driver. A cruel nickname that clung to him like rust, and one night when I returned late, I saw his truck parked in front of his house, but the doors were open, and inside was not furniture but cages. Dozens of cages, some empty, some filled with movements I couldn't comprehend at first, until my eyes adjusted and I saw human hands gripping the bars, muffled mouths staring at me with terror. A collection of lives stored, like goods to be shifted, and suddenly every whisper about him being a thief transformed into a darker truth. Because he wasn't stealing objects, he was stealing people. Not for himself but for something larger. Something that smelled of the dark web where bodies are commodities and fear is currency. And I stood frozen, knowing if he saw me, I might be caged next. But then a deeper thought struck. Why was I more scared of being caught than I was disgusted at the world that had driven him to this? Because psychology teaches us that rejection, constant humiliation, pushes men into abysses they otherwise wouldn't descend into. So tell me, as you're reading this, do you feel that chill crawling down your spine? That urge to know what happened next? If yes, then you already understand why stories like this deserve your attention. And that's why you should like this now, because if you don't, the algorithm won't show you more of what you secretly crave. Raw truth wrapped in horror. Anyway, I hid that night, but from that day I became obsessed, watching the truck, counting how many families hired him, following their trails, always ending at silence, and the more I dug, the more I realized he was part of an invisible chain. A syndicate operating through forums buried in the dark web, where his truck was only a front, and people were auctioned in live streams masked as logistics, coded advertisements disguised as shifting services, and behind those streams sat thousands of anonymous eyes bidding in cryptocurrency, and I began receiving strange emails after searching too much, threats telling me to stop, that curiosity is a disease, and I knew I had wandered too deep, but it was already too late because one evening I found an envelope slipped under my door. No name, no return address, just a USB drive inside, and when I plugged it into my laptop the files revealed everything. Videos of families inside cages, children crying, auctions closing with usernames celebrating their purchases, and in the last folder was footage of me, sitting by my own window, staring at the truck, a hidden camera catching every second of my obsession, and my blood froze because I realized they already knew I was watching. They knew I would try to expose them. But the last clip was worse. It was scheduled, dated 1 week from then, showing me being dragged into the truck, screaming while neighbors looked away, pretending they saw nothing. And in that moment, dear reader, I understood the cruelest psychology of all, not monsters in cages, not dark web syndicates, but the silence of ordinary people who prefer safety over truth. So if you're still here, reading with your heart pounding, you need to ask yourself, would you ignore this or would you act? And if you can't act, at least subscribe, at least like, because maybe together with stories like this, we spread what others want hidden. Maybe that tiny click is your rebellion against silence. And as for me, I don't know how much time I have left, because the truck hasn't moved in days. It sits there, door slightly open, waiting, and I swear I hear muffled voices in the night, calling, maybe calling my name, and I wonder if next week someone else will sit where you sit now, reading my words, knowing I was taken, and maybe then you'll understand why you should have clicked when you had the chance.